Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yeshua Hawkins. Well, of course, we're still talking about monkeypox that's in the news, a huge increase in the United States, but not the increase in vaccines that they're hoping for to kind of try to stave off and combat this virus. China, among many countries, not talking about it and its confrontation with the United States, but they're experiencing the water shortage as everybody throughout the world is. And lastly, the moves by the G7 to actually try to regulate oil prices from Russia going out throughout Europe and so forth. But first, we're going to start with the U.S., which has a reported 14,000 cases of monkeypox. But like I said, a vaccine shortage has many of those at highest risk for the virus feeling frustrated. Well, due to the vaccine shortage amidst the growing number of cases, the CDC is recommending only 1/5 of the dose be administered just below the skin in an effort to try to stretch the supply.
Well, the White House said that it will send almost 2 million doses to regions that adopt that change. Now, CDC Director Dr. Michelle Walensky said, "We expect protection to be the highest after 2 weeks after the second dose of the vaccine."
Well, according to the CDC, 98% of monkeypox cases are among men. 93% of those cases are men who reported recent sexual contact with other men, and 61% are men of color.
And now cases of children with the virus are on the rise, with 12 confirmed cases in the U.S. Now, Dr. Celine Gounder with Kaiser Health News said, quote, "Children are at higher risk for severe monkeypox. It can even be deadly for young children." Now, she also said that children's exposure to the virus is most likely from a caregiver.
Well, the U.S. government said that it would set aside an extra 50,000 doses of the vaccine for cities with large gay pride events, but wants the public to know that although the virus is most prevalent among men who have sex with other men, anyone can get the virus. The virus can also be spread through infected bedding, towels, and clothes, so be cautious when you are interacting with those types of items, especially if someone is affected with the disease.
Well, a 7-Eleven convenience store in Los Angeles, California, had a violent flash mob of people who looted the store, damaging merchandise in the process. Now, over 100 people flooded the store before police arrived to de-escalate the situation. Now, although LAPD is using video footage of the incident as well as fingerprints left at the scene, they seem to be homing in on one person who was seen throwing fruit at a scared store clerk huddling in the corner, an action that classifies as a form of assault.
Interesting. Well, we've reported on sexual assault in the military in the past, and their alarming numbers as well as the consequences that follow. In the year 2021, those assaults jumped 13%, with the largest increase in the Army, with close to 36,000 servicemen and women reporting in a confidential survey that they received unwanted sexual contact. Well, that's a big number, or a big increase in that number over those who reported the same thing in 2018.
I think it's on around 2018, it was around 20,000, so up 36,000, quite a jump there in a few years.
That's right.
Well, an age-old virus thought to be eradicated is making a comeback, and the way things are going, it's a strong comeback. Now, in 1952, a vaccine was invented to combat a growing epidemic of the virus. Dr. Hamid Jafari, director of polio eradication for the World Health Organization, said in an interview with Al Jazeera News, the poliomyelitis affects the neurons that are responsible for movement of muscles. For most people, there are no symptoms, but about 1 in 200 to 1 in 1,000 who are affected develop paralysis. And if you remember some of those older pictures, they would show the children in the wheelchairs, you know, that we're trying to keep their legs straight and so forth.
Well, he continued, once the virus is set, that paralysis is lifelong. The virus can be transmitted through close contact, but the main route of transmission of the virus is what we call fecal oral. And that's fecal contamination of hands, other items, and sometimes water, occasionally through respiratory transmission, but in most developing countries, he said, it's through fecal oral transmission.
Well, we're now going to turn to our field correspondent, Larry McGee, who's been covering several stories, including a drought that you mentioned in the beginning about China. Now they're experiencing their own drought. We've covered several stories here in the United States where the water supply getting very low for some cities. But Larry's going to be covering what China is experiencing. But first, he has a alert for everyone regarding that fentanyl, highly potent drug. They're telling people if you come across it, immediately call 911 because of how dangerous it is. Larry, what do you have for us today?
As the degradation of the current world order continues to accelerate, along with it is coming an increased presence of escapist activities such as drug use. Fentanyl, colored to appear like candy, is one of the latest crazes. The rainbow colors are believed to be a stratagem geared towards attracting children. The drug has been identified in 18 states so far. How far a recent outbreak of E. coli at Wendy's will spread is yet to still be determined. Several states have been affected at this point, with 97 people reportedly sick. The outbreak is being attributed to the company's supply of romaine lettuce. China's supply of water from the Yangtze River is being just as impacted by the changing environment as other regions. The river is China's most vital water source, providing for over 4 million of its citizens. Diminishing water in the country has left the earth scorched, along with withering crops and dying fish. In China, 66 rivers in 34 counties have been vanquished, and the larger impact of diminishing waters in the country is the effect that it'll also have on its ability to produce hydroelectric power. Disappearing waters also means disappearing electricity. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Really, Katan, with that Yangtze River, we're seeing that, you know, the drought is worldwide. Where all over, people are experiencing some form of it. So not just here in the United States, although we've seen it hit kind of hard in our area, but now China also, with one of their major rivers there, starting to dry up.
That's right, and we reported not that long ago on how China was actually regulating the amount of water coming from China into other countries. Now it seems like they're suffering that same pinch as well.
And some of these rivers, it's not just the water, but it also controls like their use of electricity, the hydro generators and so forth. So that is going to be affected as well.
Right, and that's what we're seeing with Lake Mead and their water levels dropping.
That's right.
Well, another threat to the water supply, this time a man-made chemical that lasts forever. On the Stone Ridge Dairy Farm in Maine, Fred Stone and his wife Laura are current farmers running the century-old family farm. But since 2016, Stone Ridge Dairy hasn't been able to sell any of its milk. Instead, they have to pour every last drop right down the drain.
Well, unknown to the Stones, the wastewater the state of Maine licensed for him to use for fertilizer on their land was full of toxic chemical known as PFAS. Now, their land, cows, and milk are all contaminated. PFAS is an acronym for a family of compounds called per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances. Now, the big problem with these compounds is they are linked to serious health issues like cancer, liver damage, and increased cholesterol levels, among many other things.
Well, PFAS is not only found in the soil and groundwater, but in the atmosphere as well. Scientists have even found them in raindrops falling in some of the most remote geographical sites in the world. They are inescapable, and scientists admit they are most likely here to stay. Former Deputy Director of the Maine advocacy group Defend Our Health, Patrick McRoy, was interviewed by CBS Sunday Morning. He says PFAS are, quote, virtually indestructible. You can't get rid of them, end quote.
Well, he explains the problem with this, saying, quote, "A lot of chemicals, when they go into your body or they end up in the environment, they break down. They slowly decompose. PFAS doesn't do that. Once you put PFAS somewhere, it's going to stay there practically forever," end quote. So if they are in the environment, that means these chemicals can build up in our bodies and bloodstreams and be there forever too. And actually, this group of compounds there, they've kind of nicknamed them the forever chemical because they don't ever break down.
That's right. Well, the Syrian government has said they believe Israel is conducting airstrikes on Aleppo's airport. There are no casualties reported as of yet, but there is damage to material in the area. Israel has been targeting Syria in a series of raids, their target being Hezbollah. Israel denies any involvement on the issue of these raids, but now with this breaking news of airstrikes on Aleppo, Syria is sounding the alarm. It is thought that the objective of the airstrikes was to destroy missiles that were either going to Iran or are linked to Iran in some way. Regardless, the attack has ramped up the rhetoric between the two nations.
Well, a major European pipeline is being cut off from its supply of gas by Russia for the next 3 days. It has already significantly reduced the flow of gas through the Nord Stream 1 pipeline that enters Europe through Germany. Now, a Kremlin spokesperson has blamed Western sanctions for the shutdown, that they cannot do normal repairs on the pipeline. But Germany believes that Moscow is simply using gas as a weapon.
While the BBC reports there is deep concern for the situation, the country is not in panic mode. Germany has already succeeded in fulfilling its gas reserves for the time being due to different efforts to save on gas use. Well, in some cities, public buildings are no longer lit at night. Temperatures have been reduced also to save on use for hot water heaters.
Also, other European countries like Norway and the Netherlands have delivered gas to Germany. Now, with all of these measures, it means that Germany's gas reserves are more than 80% full. Now, the country needs 85% of their reserves to get through the winter without any extra deliveries from Russia. So that's why Germany's government is not in crisis mode.
Well, Germany currently imports 40% of its gas from Russia at the price of their liking. But now if that gas stays shut off, Germany is free to go elsewhere to find gas at lower prices. Before the invasion of Ukraine, Germany was completely dependent on Russia for its gas. But since then, they have found other sources. Germany's economy minister, Robert Habeck, said this morning that gas prices in Germany might start going down. So the message coming from Berlin is actually quite positive at the moment.
Well, a group of 7 finance ministers has agreed to a price cap on Russian oil. Their goal is to cut revenues that aid Russia's war in Ukraine while continuing to keep crude flowing to avoid price hikes. Now, they have not decided on a price per barrel as of yet, but U.S. Secretary Treasurer Janet Yellen said the cap would put, quote, downward pressure on global energy prices while denying Putin revenue to fund his brutal war in Ukraine.
Yellen continued, quote, by committing to finalize and implement a price cap, the G7 will significantly reduce Russia's main source of funding for its illegal war while maintaining supplies to global energy markets by keeping Russian oil flowing at lower prices, end quote. Well, the G7 plans to introduce it at the beginning of December, which is also when the EU has planned to put sanctions on Russian oil. The ministers are still looking to expand the coalition of countries to buy Russian oil products at or below the price cap.
So now they have to follow through with coming up with strategies to implement the oil price cap in December and then the oil price product cap in February. Now, this will mean that Putin can't profit from the excess of oil prices and will protect European countries from oil price shocks in 2023. And Katana, really see this as another move against the superpower, Russia. with these bold moves here coming up in December and February, and they say they want to cut back on the funding of the illegal war that Russia is embarking on in Ukraine. But you can see that Russia is not going to take that lying down. You know, they've already said don't mess with these pipelines. We're going to push through anyways. In past, the U.S. tried to stop some of these pipelines from going through, but you know they weren't able to. So it's Russia is continuing to kind of feel the brunt of that isolation. But at some point, I think Putin is going to say enough's enough.
Right, and Russia is also continuously making agreements and trying to form alliances with countries to redirect that flow of oil so that they can still bring in money to support their economy, to kind of undermine the sanctions that the United States has placed on them. And of course, any country that does business with Russia as a result. But like you said, Russia, we've seen the same with China and so forth. They're not going to take this laying down, and they're going to do what's in the best interest of their country, irregardless of what the United States, the European Union, the G7, or whoever tries to place upon them.
Right, and they all seem like they're ganging up on them, but China and Russia, very, very big players here in this war of oil.
That's right.
Well, if you'd like to learn more about these stories, contact the House of Yahweh. When you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the monthly newsletter and the Prophetic Word magazine. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. You can visit them on any of their websites by going to Yahweh.com, YisraelHawkins.com, and Yahweh'sBranch.com. You can also visit our website by going to YPNnews.com. You can email the House of Yahweh at info@Yahweh.com. And for all calls outside the United States, please dial the number on your screen. And don't forget the Yisrael Says and Ask Yisrael programs available to assist you in studying and understanding the Scriptures. You can find those programs by going to YisraelSays.com and AskYisrael.com.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next is another classic message from Yisrael Hawkins. From all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.